city of San Mateo. She's employed as a realtor at Caldwell Banker in Burlingame, and I turn it over to Karyl. And I'm gonna let her have my my computer
so that people
at home can see her.
Good evening. I am very happy to be able to talk to you this evening about Article 34. It's a subject that is highly relevant to our current context, both locally and statewide. So let's dive right in. Next slide, please.
This slide is okay.
Okay, the next one. Okay, so Article 34 is an amendment to the California Constitution.
Karyl?
It was adopted in 1950. But to understand its meaning and import, we have to rewind to a discussion of real estate.
We're not seeing the slides.
In the early 1900s. So the real estate community believed with complete conviction in the need for neighborhood homogeneity. In other words, they believed in the need to preserve the whiteness.
No, the slides are not up.
Oh, oh yeah, wait a minute, something's wrong here.
Yeah, no. Marshall, we don't see the slides. Are you sharing those?
I can't hear her either. So
are you putting up the slides, Marshall?
You can't hear me though, Marshall?
We hear you, Kay. We just can't see the slides.
Oh, here perfect, but don't see slides. Okay. So they're seeing me, but they're not seeing the slides. Okay.
That's correct. We see your beautiful face, but we don't see the beautiful slides.
Share it. So you so go back.
Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, go back to Zoom.
I'm trying to go back to Zoom.
Do you want Marshall? Do you want me to do it? Marshall, do you want me to put the slides up?
He's got a Mac.
What is the issue here?
Yeah, I don't have a Mac, so there you go. Okay, so go back to the Zoom. Okay, now do share.
You look great.
So where are the slides now?
Okay.
We're getting there.
Now what?
You have to give me.
You did the share.
Okay. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
That should
All right.
now work.
So Nancy, can you see this?
Can you put it on slideshow?
I can't hear anybody.
Yes, we do see your slide. If you start slideshow, we'll see just one slide at a time.
So can somebody give me an indication of whether they can see the slides at this point? Nod or something?
No.
Oh, you can't? Oh, okay.
On Zoom, I see the
So
slides.
Susie is saying she can't see the slide.
Okay. No, but can we put them on slideshow?
Okay.
Right.
At least we got one down, right?
So we need to also do the show so that we can get rid of the other stuff.
I see Article 34 plus the calendar.
Your computer's so different than mine. No, oh, do this one down here. There we go. There we go. Okay.
All right, so we'll try again here. So Article 34 which is the lead character in our story tonight, is an amendment to the California Constitution that was adopted in 1950. But if we really want to understand its meaning and import, we have to rewind to a discussion of the real estate industry at the beginning of the century. So the real estate community believed with complete certainty in the need for neighborhood homogeneity. In other words, to preserve the whiteness of neighborhoods. To enable this belief to take hold, they propagated a myth. We'll call it the big myth, since the big lie is already taken, right? And this myth asserted that undesirable human elements will depreciate property values. They promoted this myth vigorously, and in the process, they taught white Americans to view any minority person, not as an individual, but as a threat to their property and to themselves personally. So one of the things that's really important to understand is how influential the realtors were in the early 1900s. This was the point at which the whole land use framework was being built out. And so the realtors at this point were considered the experts. They were the go-to for all things housing. They were extensively consulted. So they had a lot of opportunity to influence, to embed this myth in the public consciousness and also in housing policy. So years later, this myth was completely discredited, including by analysts within the real estate industry. But in the meantime, it did enormous damage. It became the justification and underpinning for policies and practices that segregated communities all across this country. So there were many such policies and practices, and one that I'm known to rail against is R1 zoning. So, so we can go to the next slide. So in 1917, there was a Supreme Court decision called Buchanan versus Worley. And the justices determined that explicitly racial zoning was unconstitutional. The year before that, in 1916, R1 zoning had shown up for the first time in Berkeley, California. But the Buchanan decision provoked a sense of urgency about using this as a way to circumvent the ruling against racial zoning. So what R1 zoning did, and I think most of us know this, is to require that there be only one home per lot, right? And historically, the minimum lot size has been large. So what this did was to make housing expensive. And it was unaffordable to lower income, lower income folks. And that included many, if not most, aspiring minority home buyers. So the next slide. So the motivations for this were not just racist, they were also classist. So Richard Rothstein, in his book, The Color of Law, points out that class snobbishness and racial prejudice were so intertwined that when these ordinances were passed, it would have been impossible to disentangle the two. But the underlying racial motivations were often overt. So he talks about this man, Ernest Freund, who was the expert in administrative law. He was a Columbia Law professor. And Rothstein writes this: because the Buchanan decision had made it impossible to find an appropriate legal formula for segregation, Freund said that zoning, masquerading as an economic measure, was the most reasonable means of accomplishing the same end. So R1 zoning became prevalent in communities across the country. So I went online, I was thinking, well, just how prevalent, right? So I found some statistics, and it said that in Los Angeles, 70% of the residential land is zoned R1. In Seattle, 80%. In San Jose, it's nearly 90% that's zoned R1. So then I found this map that really knocked my socks off. So can we have the next slide?
So Carol,
Yeah.
I'm getting the message that people are only seeing the first.
I'm not seeing any slides.
Oh, really? Oh,
I don't know why.
oh, that's all I'm
It's not
seeing
in
right here too.
slideshow
Yeah.
mode.
Huh.
You gotta hit slideshow on the
Because that's
top,
my computer.
It's
on the
still
very,
on.
very top.
It's just
Oh,
on the
well, I want
first.
them to see this map. It's really important to see this map. Yeah.
We would like
Hit
to see the
you have to
country
hit
of every
slideshow on the
slide.
very, very top tabs. And then you'll find how to do it there.
So apologies,
Go to the top.
everyone. I'm getting the word that people are only seeing the first slide.
Can you
Move
hear
the
me?
cursor to the very top.
Can you guys hear us?
Pull Carol's
Go to the very top
presentation up
with your
myself.
cursor.
Diana, can you hear me? Can you hear us?
I have to be made the host in order to do it.
No, you should be able to do it on
Anybody on Zoom
co-host
hear us?
because Susie is co-host.
Can Zoom
Diana,
hear
Diana
us?
and Carrie can't hear
You
us.
should be able to do it.
Or co-host.
Hello? Can mic check, mic check? Can anybody
So-
hear me?
I
So
could be
Diana,
the host.
Mic check, mic check.
You want to try?
Diana, can you hear me?
Can anybody hear me?
Okay.
I can hear, I think Diana can't.
Yeah, JB, I can hear you. I don't know that Marshall or Diana are hearing us. I wonder
So
if
us
Marshall,
Zoom can hear each
his,
other. That
I don't
keeps
know
there.
if his screen sharing
Okay.
isn't
So
working.
you're still sharing, right? So I just made Marshall host. Let's see are you able to go on to the next slide?
This one, yeah. So can everybody see
You
this?
have to
Can
move
you
the
use-
cursor. You have to move the cursor to the top and click on slideshow. Then you can advance.
Show to everyone. It's still not in the slideshow mode. Okay. Oh, okay. Down at the bottom where
I don't think they can
It's
hear it.
the slideshow mode. Remember what we were looking at before? That's what,
Maybe put it in chat.
What are you trying to do?
oh, so remember, so I pulled up the wrong one. It needs to be slideshow.
It's been
Okay.
put in
Oh,
multiple times.
there it is.
Right, but we need to do, see, I thought this was slideshow. It is.
It is.
Okay.
All right. So that's on there. So let's see if we can get, it's not changing on there.
Does someone have Diane or Marshall's number so they can text them on their phone?
understand because
Yeah, I'm
Susie's able
trying.
to,
Oh, okay.
There we go.
There you
Okay.
go.
There we go.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Are you seeing the map now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. There's the map. Okay. I'd like to make it full
Right, so,
screen.
this is a map, a zoning map of San Mateo. And everything in yellow, even including the parts that are a little orangey, is R1. So that means that those areas were all designated one home to one lot. So you see my little snarky question over there. Is it any wonder we have a housing crisis? You know, we can't have any more density in neighborhoods like that.
Hey, Diana?
You know, I don't know for San Mateo. It does look high.
Hello? Can someone hear me? Hello?
Yeah, so at the end, we'll have, Q&A.
No, well, no, this isn't a Q
But
and
one
A.
of the most explicitly racist tools to prevent the incursion of minorities into white neighborhoods was the use of racially restrictive covenants. And I think most of us are familiar with those at this point. Okay, so these were provisions that were written into deeds that said that nobody but white people can live within the confines of this neighborhood. I've brought an example this evening, and the example that I chose it because it specifically named more groups than any other covenants that I had read. And so you want to show them? And Diana, do you want to read them?
I don't know if can you hear me? I don't know if people can hear me from Marshall's, but.
We can hear you, Diana.
So
but
the
we
racial
can't see the
covenants are
slide.
no person of African, Japanese, Chinese, Hindu, Indian, Korean, or Mongolian descent, or person not wholly of the Caucasian race shall be permitted to purchase, own, lease, or occupy said property except in the capacity of domestic servants, gardeners, or chauffeurs. Oh my gosh.
So all of the covenants would say, as this one does, no person not wholly of the Caucasian race. Not all of them called out groups the way this one does. But what I read is that in different parts of the country, they called out different groups because of the makeup of the populace. So I'm not, yeah.
It's not working. Let's see.
It won't progress, huh? So,
This slides are not progressing.
oh, now it shows the racial covenants. Okay,
good.
okay.
The question, of course, is, can they hear you?
At the same time, it's a kind of an either or.
Yeah.
It's a zero-sum game here.
Yes, we can hear you. We can
Yes.
hear you.
Chat is saying.
There's 21 comments.
Oh.
We hear you.
Oh, good. Well, that's something.
Okay, good.
Hearing you is fine.
What are they saying about it's the slides.
Well, it looks like we're progressing.
Well, so I now have the Baywood advertisement in front of me. So, so I'll go on. The use of the racial covenants became widespread, and developers even bragged about it in their advertising. So these are two ads. One's from Britton Park in San Carlos, and it says, a restricted residence tract, right? And the other one is from that neighborhood Baywood in San Mateo, and that says in the print that you probably can't read, proper restrictions to safeguard your investment. Now, it also says in there is a hope for you here. Except if you're African, Japanese, Chinese, it doesn't want to say that, right? So anyway, in the years after World War II, you know, suburbia was built out, huge tracts were developed. And the presence of these racial covenants was a requirement for a developer to get FHA approval. And the reason FHA approval was so important is that that was what enabled them to get the low interest loans that they needed to buy land and finance construction. So that takes me to another massive area of public policy that had a profound effect on segregating this country, which is lending. So, yep. So the Federal Housing Administration was created in 1934 to solve the problem of middle-class renters who are unable to obtain loans and purchase homes. The way it worked was that the FHA guaranteed loans, so the bank making the loan, the risk to them was reduced. From the beginning, well, wait, I skipped something. So FHA was tasked with making loans that were economically sound. Those were the words. From the beginning, the FHA maintained that no loan could be economically sound if the property was in a neighborhood that was or that could become occupied by Blacks. So this was the premise of the infamous residential security maps or redlining maps. So when some of us were working to prepare for an event in 2019, we invited Richard Rothstein to come to San Mateo to speak about the color of law. We worked rather furiously to try to find redlining maps for cities in San Mateo County. We came up empty-handed. And what we eventually learned is they only had the maps for cities with 40,000 population or more at the time. So I wanted to find an example. So as a point of privilege, I pulled up my hometown, which was Baltimore. Do you want to go on to the next slide?
Next slide.
There we go. So you can see that the map is divided into 4 colors: green, blue, yellow, and red. The areas where African Americans lived were outlined in red, and they were deemed, the word was hazardous. And no federally regulated lender would make a loan there. So I give you this kind of background of, the society at that time. Just to give you an idea of the world into which Article 34 was born. It was rife with discrimination, highly exclusionary, extensively segregated, a world in which whites had been encouraged to view minorities as an existential threat. So let's talk about the origins of Article 34, as I say, our key character in the story tonight. And in order to do that, we need to travel. No, it hasn't progressed. This has not progressed, Marshall. Now it has. Okay. We need to travel north to the coastal town of Eureka.
Problem is,
So Article 34 grew out of a fight in this northern coastal town. So the city was in the process of applying to the federal government for funding to build low-income public housing. Residents collected signatures calling for the city council to submit their decision to build this housing to the voters for approval. The city refused, and so it ended up in a lawsuit. And in 1950, the state Supreme Court ruled against the residents, saying that a referendum could only be used in relation to legislative acts. So, a law or a bill or something like that, not in relation to executive or administrative acts. That's right. So, and they said that the decision by the city council to build this housing was an administrative act. So, so the residents lost on that, but in response, the California Real Estate Association brought forth an initiative to combat the decision. This initiative would require that all publicly funded low-income housing be subjected to the voters for approval or disapproval, as the case may be. The rationale they gave is that the voters should have an opportunity to weigh in on these projects because they had the potential to affect taxpayer debt, to create taxpayer debt. But the underlying racial motivations were very much in evidence. So the advertising for the campaign, which the realtors paid for, talked about the fact that minority pressure groups were the ones pushing for this. The campaign played to racist fears, and they even spiced it up a little by saying that these projects would be socialist. So I wanted to take a moment to
talk about
the role of realtors. And I mean,
the history
this is uncomfortable for me. I am a realtor, but it doesn't change the reality of it. I mean, I read a book recently by a man named Gene Slater, who was an urban planner, and he actually lives in Foster City. And the book chronicles the culpability of realtors in segregating this country. So I got a lot of my kind of in-depth knowledge from reading this book. As I said, that the realtors were very influential at this point in time. And some of the things that I'll share is that I told you about the myth. They created this big myth. They provided a lot of input to redlining maps. Again, they were the go-to for housing, so they were consulted for, you know, which neighborhoods are good, which neighborhoods are dangerous, you know, which are hazardous, right? They were the driving force behind this Article 34. They were the driving force behind Proposition 14 in the 1960s, which actually overturned California's fair housing law. They would allow no Black members into their associations. If one of their members sold a house to a Black member in a white neighborhood, they would be expelled. When integration started to take hold, they instructed their members in how to get around the new rules. So, I mean, I'll stop there, but I think what I want you to understand that there's a lot of blame lying at the feet of realtors when it comes to segregating this country. So Article 34, which had been a creation of the California Real Estate Association, appeared on the ballot in 1950. And this is the pivotal language. I mean, I will read this. There has to be a more straightforward way to say what it's trying to say. It just sounds like a lot of gobbledygook, but here we go. No low-rent housing project shall hereafter be developed, constructed, or acquired in any manner by any state public body until a majority of the qualified electors of the city, town, or county, as the case may be, in which it is proposed to develop, construct, or acquire the same, voting upon such issue, approve such project by voting in favor thereof at an election to be held for that purpose or at any general or special election. So if you unravel all of that, it's saying, you know, what the realtors were trying to get at, which is that all publicly funded, low-income housing would be voted on by the residents of the city in question. So this passed, not by a large margin, but apparently by about 50,000 votes. So what are the impacts of Article 34? Well, for decades, it has stymied low-income housing construction. By 1969, nearly half of the projects that came before voters in Article 34 elections were turned down. And that was nearly 15,000 units of housing. Inevitably, the costs and uncertainty of these referenda prevented projects from ever coming forward, especially in higher opportunity areas. It was just too risky and too expensive. So it's weakened the effort to integrate our communities, and it's tended to limit projects to the less desirable areas, along freeways, adjacent to industrial areas, or in areas of historic underinvestment. Also, it's important to realize that these referenda add to the cost of creating an affordable unit significantly. And obviously that's counterproductive to our interest in creating more housing, especially to the lower tiers of affordability. So Article 34 has been challenged. In 1971, it was challenged in court in a case named James versus Valtierra, and the constitutionality of this was upheld. Now, this case was fought by a group of African Americans and Mexican Americans in San Jose and San Mateo County, who alleged that this law is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause, which is what Tom was talking about earlier. But the court ruled no, it was not, because Article 34 did not rely on distinctions based on race. That all low-income housing was subject to the referenda, and not just those where minority populations would live. So they said, nope, it's constitutional. So there have been other court challenges, and it also has been on the ballot 3 times for overturn: 1974, 1980, and 1993, and all 3 times it failed. So where does that leave us? What's the current status of Article 34? Not quite there yet, Marshall, but we'll get there. Over the years, the impact of Article 34 has actually lessened because courts have narrowed the scope of its applicability. Moreover, a lot of the affordable housing that's developed today is developed by private developers or nonprofit housing corporations using state or federal tax credits. And the courts have ruled that such projects do not trigger the requirement for a voter referendum. Article 34 is still a menace, still wreaks havoc and stands in the way, and that has been apparent with the La Quinta Inn. So the La Quinta Inn is located on El Camino Real in Millbrae. And in September of last year, the Board of Supervisors adopted a resolution, to purchase the La Quinta Inn with the intention of applying to Project Home Key for funding. The acquisition was part of the county's stated objective to make homelessness in San Mateo County rare and hopefully never chronic. So what is Project Home Key? This was an innovative program that was started during the COVID pandemic. My slide making kind of broke down, so just stick with this one for now. Is an innovative program that was initiated during the pandemic to fund and facilitate the acquisition of buildings, usually hotels and motels, and their conversion into housing for either the homeless or those at risk of becoming homeless. And to date, there have been 250 such projects with more than 15,000 housing units. So it was innovative and by all accounts, a very successful program. Statewide, yes.
Well, at the time, originally, I will have to say the most were in Redwood City. Redwood City had more units.
Is very receptive.
Yeah, Redwood City had 5. It was the most of any other city in the state. Yeah.
So in response to the county's resolution to purchase the La Quinta Inn, the city of Millbrae filed suit invoking Article 34. Now this is where it gets a little hairy. So the lawsuit took issue with what the state legislature had done. The state legislature had passed exemptions to the requirement for an Article 34 referendum based on funding sources. In other words, where the money was coming from. So in the case of the Home Key project, the money came from the CARES Act. So they declared that, the CARES Act funding made Home Key projects exempt, right? Well, Millbrae said, that that's not legitimate, and those exemptions based on funding are unconstitutional. The lawsuit also alleges that the city, their revenues were going to be affected by this project, that their taxes would be diminished, and also that jobs, local jobs would be lost. So this is, the county did offer to offset some of those fiscal impacts. So they offered to pay $600,000 in each of 3 successive years. And they also offered to provide security patrols for the new complex. So they did respond to this concern. But the issue has been very contentious. It's even resulted in the effort to recall 2 of the council members who steadfastly have supported this project. And very troubling has been some of the opposition rhetoric that really echoed back to 1950, you know, preying on the fears of residents and portraying the people who would eventually live there again as being a threat, you know, an existential threat, you know, to your safety and your well-being. So it's also been not only contentious, but really scary to many of us, because Millbrae is seeking to invalidate these funding exemptions, one of which relates to the Home Key project. And if the court sides with Millbrae, this could have really damaging impacts. It could slow construction, it could drive up costs even more, and prevent housing from being built in areas where it's most needed. So it's not known how this will play out. Interestingly, the hearing on this happened today. It started at 9 o'clock and it ended at 2:40. They did take a lunch break. I listened to much, but not all of it. The decision was not rendered today. We have to wait for that. I have no idea what it will be. But clearly, all of this demonstrates the potential, continuing potential of Article 34 to wreak havoc and to stand in the way of our getting the housing that we so desperately need. So, now this slide. So what do we do about it? How can we disable this racist relic? So one option would be to do as South City has done. So in 2022, South City had on its ballot Measure AA, which was what they call a blanket authorization. So Measure AA asked the voters to authorize a 1% increase in the housing stock for each of 8 years. So it was authorizing housing in bulk. It wasn't site-specific. They weren't voting on a particular project, but they were just saying that this much additional housing can be added to the housing stock. So Measure AA was also very plain that it did not require the city to commit to any actual construction, and it did not increase taxes in any way. So this won 60-40. And James Coleman, who's the mayor of South San Francisco, said that he thinks that it had a lot to do with how it was presented to the voters, which I think we're all sympathetic to the fact that how you talk about something has a lot to do with how people react to it, right? So he said they presented it as an affordable housing measure. And he said there was almost no campaign around it, which was, you know, it's not like they invested heavily in getting it passed, but it passed 60-40. So the constitutionality of this blanket approach has been upheld, and has actually been used in other places. I found that Los Angeles had used it, San Diego, Berkeley, Oakland, and Sacramento County. Now, the instance in Sacramento County is particularly interesting because it included not just Sacramento County in the unincorporated area, but it included Sacramento County and its cities. So we could do a similar thing here in San Mateo County, create a blanket authorization for the county, including its cities, right? To my knowledge, there is not a plan to do this year at least, and perhaps with good reason. You know, we had a conversation with Supervisor Corzo the other day, and so there may be wisdom around not doing it now. But what there is on the ballot this year is another attempt at overturning Article 34. And this is SCA 2. The last time the overturn was defeated was in 1993. And since then, the housing crisis has absolutely exploded. So the hope is that at this point, the mindset of voters will be different. And again, it's very important how it's presented to them. But I also want to note that the appeal of local control, which is what Article 34 gives a community, you know, you can say yes or no to this housing, right? The appeal of that is not to be underestimated. And I think we're all going to have to fight hard to pass it this time. So I want to conclude with a quote. So, Jess Hudson hi Jess, of United Way Bay Area, wrote an excellent paper on Article 34 and the La Quinta Inn and the lawsuit. And she wrote this, quote, Article 34 has served as a de facto ban on public housing and social housing in the state and perpetuated a racist and classist barrier to effective housing policies, impacting all but especially people of color in the state. So Article 34 is a racist relic, and its retirement is way overdue at this point. So everybody needs to vote yes on SCA2. And at this point, anybody have questions? And you know, thanks for coming, Jess. You know, so Jess was at the hearing today, right? And she stayed for the duration, and I was not able to. So do you want to tell us what your impression was about what happened?
Sure. I apologize for being late. Yes.
So we do have people on Zoom. So what I'm going to do is bring our
Well, she could come over there.
You could just sit there.
Yeah.
Just come over there.
Yeah, so I'm Jess Hudson. I am a Boulder resident of Millbrae. I have been working on this
home key project since the first council meeting. I've never been support. I also work united with the Bay Area as their policy manager, doing quite a lot of housing, but also generally anti-property work at the federal, state, and local level. So the case today was really interesting, and I think not probably what anybody expected. Initially, some folks thought that this case would be wrapped up in a day.
Oh, they can't hear her.
Okay. Wait, yeah.
Do they have to be on mine?
Okay.
Put yourself on mute, and I'm going to turn on my speaker and see if that helps.
Can you all hear me now?
A little too much. Too many times.
That's better.
How's it now?
Better. Better.
Good?
Thank you.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Jess Hudson. I'm a 12-year resident of Millbrae. I have been involved in this case since the first city council meeting. I ran the campaign in support for the Millbrae Home Key project. And then I also wrote the brief on this case for United Way Bay Area, where I'm a public policy manager working on state, federal, and local legislation, particularly around housing, but also around other anti-poverty issues. The hearing was very interesting today, and I think not what anyone expected. The action brought by the city was a validation claim, and the county alleged that the case did not have standing or ripeness. The standing refers to whether or not an entity is a person who has an interest in the case, and whether or not they're qualified to be a party to the suit. The county alleged that the city was not actually qualified to bring the suit because Article 34 is something the voters do to exercise their right to vote. The city of Millbrae is not a voter. The city of Millbrae doesn't represent all voters in Millbrae. So the county is alleging that the city does not have standing to bring the suit because they are not qualified electors. And that was something that the judge was unsure of. Initially, when we started in the morning, she said she was inclined to grant standing. By the end, she said that she was not sure. The other issue that the county brought forth was ripeness. Ripeness refers to whether all the aspects of the suit are ready to be heard. So the county was suggesting that it is not ready to be heard because the city was alleging that home key, the whole of home key, the statewide home key, is unconstitutional. Since the county has not received home key funding, that issue would not be ripe to judge. So we can't adjudicate a case where all of the facts of the case are not ready, they're not ripe. So that was something that we thought would be determined today. It was not. The other aspects of the case are all up in the air as well. The judge was clear that she had only had 10 days to review the case, had not had time to review all of the briefings, and had a lot of questions for counsel on both sides about really the basic mechanics of their arguments of the case. So oral arguments were heard, and after a long time in court, what they determined was that both parties to the case, the county and the city, will draft kind of the order that they would like the judge to grant, submit it to the judge, and she said, and I quote, she will cut and paste from those orders to make her own decision. So right now what the timeline looks like is those orders will be submitted by April 17th from both of the litigant parties to the judge. And then and I should have brought my notes in with me, but they're in the car. I believe it's June 26th. She will have a preliminary decision, and then has 2 weeks after that for both parties to file their rebuttals. She said there's a possibility that the fourth step after that could be coming back for oral arguments, but she hopes that it won't come to that. So Judge Feinman said that she would like to get this wrapped up as soon as possible, but really acknowledged that she needed a lot more time to learn the case. It is a very complicated case. I will say I am a single mom of 2 kids with a full-time job. I'm on a city commission, a county commission, and serve in a lot of other capacities. I have the entire case file printed next to my bed, and I've read it through twice. So I understand that it does take time. I made the time. So we're going to have to give her a little bit of time to read the full case file and to be able to do some of the legal research. She intends to come back with a statement of facts, a factual analysis, which will be really helpful for us to determine where we think that she will go with this case and what will come next. So that's going to take place, I believe, in the time between April 17th, when those proposal.
So just repeat the question.
Oh, the question was.
Yes, so a date for the factual analysis was not set, but it would occur after the April 17th submission by both parties with their draft orders. And then she will provide that to council. I monitor the suit online, so I will see it when it is filed. And then after that is submitted, there will be an opportunity for rebuttals and then a decision. So what I had hoped to be able to tell you all is that this suit was denied based on standing. That's not the case. And I had also hoped I could give you maybe a more clear indication of where we thought this case was going, and I can't. I think the most surprising thing about the court sitting in the courtroom all day today was realizing that there are going to be at least a few more hearings on this. It is a complicated issue. Judge Feinman also said that she was inclined not to rule on the constitutionality of Article 34.
For the funding.
Right, if she doesn't, yeah. So Karyl just asked about the funding exemptions, which are also at stake. And those funding exemptions are provided under AB 83, Health and Safety Code 37001, which was amended in the election implementation law. And then in the exemptions are under AB 140, which exempted ARPA funding, projects funded with ARPA funding from Article 34, and then from SB 4, I've discalculated, let me think, 469 by Senator Wiener, which gave exemptions also for care funding to fund home key projects. So yes, a lot is at stake. It did sound very much, and I appreciate that Judge Feinman was honest in her assessment that as a Superior Court judge, she didn't feel prepared to rule on an issue of constitutionality, and felt that there would be an appeal and that would be better suited to go to this Supreme Court, to the Ninth Circuit. I tend to agree.
How do you get that constitutionality to the
So to get this issue brought to let me go back. So what it looks like Judge Feinman is interested in doing is potentially limiting the scope of her ruling only to whether the September 12th Board of Supervisors resolution approving the acquisition of the project is valid or not, limiting the scope of her ruling to the local issue. In order for that, then, if she chooses not to rule on the constitutionality of Article 34, that is the basis of the City of Millbrae's case, then in the City of Millbrae would need to file an appeal to have the case moved up to the Ninth Circuit Supreme Court, which may be, I agree, is probably the better venue for this type of question. Sorry, I'm terrible at that.
I'd like to go ahead and open up to any questions anyone has.
How about the questions that were being asked by the judge, whether she had an inclination of one way or the other?
So the question is whether by the questions asked by the judge, we can tell kind of what her inclination was. I don't think so. And that was something that surprised me today. I think because the judge was pretty honest that she needed to do quite a bit more fact-finding and review of the pleadings to really understand some of the issues that are at play here. I don't think we can say one way or another where we think that she is leaning on this. Yes.
Okay, and I'd like to open up questions to anybody on Zoom. If you'd go ahead and raise your,
I'm a little confused by
do a
the
raise hand.
complexity you say of the case, because I thought I just heard you say that the judge said, unless I heard this right, the judge is going to rule strictly on whether county board approval of funds for a program project for unhoused people in the Quinta, whether the funding for that was okay. Okay, was whether that was legal or something. And I heard you say that, and that was what the judge was gonna focus his ruling.
Can you
Okay,
guys
so I'm going to
repeat?
paraphrase. I'm going to paraphrase the question. So the question is that I said that this is complicated and that the I'm trying to paraphrase.
That the focus is simply
That the focus is
simply focus on the ruling about the funding by the Board of Supervisors to use the La Quinta for unhoused.
Okay, so the question is, what's complicated about the case if the judge is ruling only on the validation action? And I think what's complicated is she suggested that that is her inclination, but that does not necessarily mean that that is what will happen. She could make a ruling on these issues. She's inclined not to at this time. And a lot of this was predicated on the fact that she felt that she didn't have enough knowledge of the case to make those decisions and thought that a Supreme Court might be a better venue for that. She does have the power to make that decision. So it's a bit up in the air right now. And we're going to have to see when we come back to court if, after reviewing the materials more closely and diving into the case law that was cited, if her opinion changes. Her opinion changed from the beginning, from 9 a.m., where she thought that she was inclined to grant standing and ripeness, to 1:30 when she actually wasn't sure and had a lot more questions. So I think what's complicated here is that the Judge Feinman is not very readable right now because she's going to do her homework.
So can I